Hi everyone, and welcome to episode 24 of So Now You're a Teacher. I'm your host, Liesl McConchie, international expert on brain-based learning, author, teacher, and mom of three who just got a full tank of gas for the first time in over 2 months. Yep, that's right. Hey everyone, in this is episode 24. This is going to be our second to last episode. That's right, we're winding down this series. And in this second to last episode, and in our last episode, we're going to turn our direction and we're going to look forward. There's some really big decisions that people are making, and I want to make sure that you are all informed as we look ahead to what school looks like in the fall of the 2020-2021 school year. So whether you're a parent or whether you're a teacher, whether you're a school leader, whether you homeschool, this is very important information for you, because in this episode, I'm going to answer the question, what does a brain-friendly return to school look like? Now, my plea to teachers and to school leaders is to really listen in to what I'll be sharing here in this episode. Parents, please be sharing this with the schools that you work, that your children attend. This is really important that we get this right. Now, as always, I'm going to try my best to stay in my lane and focus in on what I know, and that is the brain. I'm not a health expert. I'm not a scientist, so I don't know what the restrictions are going to be. So whatever those are going to be, I'm just going to focus on this episode on what a brain-friendly return to school looks like. And I'm going to share my 4 biggest concerns for what might happen, what I'm pretty confident is going to happen in a lot of schools, that is very unfriendly to the brain and how the brain learns, and what we can do about that. So let's just jump right in. What I'm worried it will look like that's not brain friendly is that our children will go back to school, and that very first day, that first week, however long we're in some weird hybrid type of learning, that it's just going to be saturated in anxiety. I can see it. I can picture schools going back, and it's just a lot of like control and rigidness and panic and terror and fear of students being far enough apart and just like a lot of that kind of stuff. And we've talked a little bit about this before, but there is just so much about that is really going to be bad for the brain and learning as we try to go back to school and find some kind of normalcy. Because deep in here, the amygdala, the emotional control center of the brain, that is the part of the brain that processes anxiety, fear, threat, all of these really like panicking, triggering emotions. And when the amygdala is activated, it shuts down working memory here in the prefrontal cortex, and that is where learning starts in the brain. And so if we have students coming back to school and it's just this, hey, hey, be careful, we might as well just stay home. We might as well just stay home and continue what we're doing now, because we're going to make it really hard for the brain to learn. Instead, so if we want the brain on our sides, what I would love for all of our kids to go back to is this huge, joyful celebration that students return to school and there is balloons and banners and music playing and dance parties happening as we return to a place that we have missed so much. And all of that can still happen with whatever the new physical distancing restrictions will be once we get there. So please, parents, teachers, school leaders, please make sure that as we return back to school, that it is just a joyful celebration and exciting time to be back in school, because those are the emotions that help boost learning, that help students feel safe physically and emotionally, and these are really critical concerns of mine as a brain expert as we look to going back to school sometime in some way. My second biggest concern about going back to school in the fall and how we might create some really unfriendly brain circumstances is I'm concerned that students are going to sit in a desk all day long, never moving, because we're afraid that they're going to get too close to another human being. Instead, when we look at brain-friendly learning environments, students need to be moving every 5, 10, 15 minutes, depending on their age and some other factors we've talked about before. Now, you can still do this, even with whatever physical distancing restrictions that we have. They can just stand up and have a one-song dance party. They can do relay races when they're far away. They can run laps around a building when they're separate from each other. Take the lesson outside, teachers. Take them outside. Teach them on a rolling whiteboard. Teach them with some sidewalk chalk on the ground. Like, we can still keep our students moving. I'm just really worried that we're going to be living in fear and we're just going to have them sit in their desk and never leave all day long. And that's really not going to be good for learning and for their brain. So keep that in mind as you are designing what school looks like in the fall. My third concern, as I look at how this might roll out in the fall, is that schools will cram content during the limited time they have with students. So there's a lot of different models that schools are out there considering. I work with a lot of schools right now, and I'm hearing from a lot of them, and they've got some really creative ideas as to how this is going to work out. And whether we're all in school at the same time or we're there some days or part days and we're still home at some times, I don't know exactly what it's going to look like for you and your school and your family and your children. But it's possible that our students won't be at school the same amount of hours and the same amount of days as they were in the past. And so my concern is that schools are going to cram in, whenever students are physically there, I'm concerned that schools are going to cram in so much direct instruction when they're there because they just don't have as much time as they've had in the past. Now, what that does is that negates the brain's need for things like chunking down information into smaller pieces. It negates the brain's need for time for consolidation, for the layers of learning that the brain naturally learns with. There's a lot of things that don't mesh well with the way the brain naturally learns. So that's something I'm also concerned of. So please be aware of that. Be cautious of that as we head back into the fall. Parents, be mindful of that. And we'll talk later about what you can do as a parent. My fourth concern as we look at going back to school in the fall is that, assuming we'll have some type of limited time with students directly, my concern is that schools will narrow in on core subjects, your reading, writing, math, and will ignore some of the other things that, when you dig into the research about the brain, are extremely critical for learning. So my concern is that things like social emotional learning will get put off to the side. Things like the arts, things like music, things like PE, even more than they've already been pushed to the side. My concern is they're going to hit the sidelines and not be part of our education system. And this concerns me deeply as an expert on the brain. Heaven help us all if it really goes that way. These are critical for a child's brain. Now, I'm not saying that they all have to happen at school. If we are in some kind of hybrid model, it's okay that all of the whatever, some can happen in person and some can happen at home. I'm not going to say what should be where. But please, let's remember how important these things are. Social emotional learning, it's critical for students to be able to learn how to emotionally regulate, hope, optimism, teaching responsibility. All of those incredible life skills are directly connected to higher academic achievement. The research is clear. The arts, the music, the drama, the research supports more of this, not less of this. And PE, we've talked about this before. You can head on back to episodes 4, 5, and 6, I think, to review why that's so important. Now, why will a lot of these things still happen at a lot of schools, in my opinion? Well, that's because our education system in most places is not designed with the brain in mind. It is just traditions that have been passed down from generation of teachers to generation of teachers, and not every educator understands the brain the way I do. I've been spending 20 years studying the brain, how it learns. I have experience working with schools all over the world. I've helped start a brand new school from scratch without any past ways of things, how things need to be. So it's really tricky to make changes, to change old patterns. But those are my 4 biggest concerns as we look ahead to the future. My concerns are that the beginning of school will be full of fear and anxiety and panic, and that's just going to destroy the brain's ability to learn. That students are just going to be sitting in a desk and not be able to move, that we're going to cram so much content into a short amount of time, and that we're going to push aside a lot of really important subjects that really improve student learning and really help to improve just the overall education of the young people that we serve. So if it happens at your school, I wouldn't be surprised. It's pretty normal. Check out my last episode here. That'll come out here in a couple days, and I'll share with you what we can do to help make some changes as we look ahead to the future. We can do this, guys. Until next time, take a deep breath. Oxygen is good for the brain.